Welcome everybody. Get yourselves comfortable. We got a full house tonight, so let's give our peers, our fellow class of 2024. I'm assuming we'll confirm in a second here. Mostly class 2024, but let's give everybody a second to get settled because, like I said, we got a full house, and then Peg and I will do quick intros and some housekeeping stuff and dive into the task at hand.
All right, I got the chat switched over. Yeah, while we're waiting, it's always fun if people would put in the chat where you are. It's fun to see where we have people coming in tonight. So you could just put in what state or whatever.
State or city, and then if you
Richmond,
have
Texas. All right. I used to live in Sugar Land, Texas, right next door. I have buddies that live in Richmond.
Wilmington, North Carolina. I get some deer.
We got Puerto Rico, Seattle, woohoo.
Westfield. Tennessee, Louisiana, Deep South.
Awesome. Rockville. I lived in Rockville for a summer.
Albuquerque. And then also if you North Andover, Scarlet Knights. North Andover, Mass, Scarlet Knights. So we used to play them in high school, Peggy. So
yeah, you gotta let it go. You gotta let it go, buddy.
Let it go.
Wow, we got
I kid. Marsh Vegas, baby. Marsh Vegas, Mass. And also curious to hear what's a graduating class of the student or students. Again, I think we're probably talking to mostly class 2024 folks, but curious if we got some overachievers here
yeah,
there we go, 25 and 23, right? Some 23, 25,
there's
and
27. Woohoo!
There we go.
Make me feel old.
Des Moines, Iowa. All right.
Cypress. I like to have Lone Star people here. Twins, nice. Just like me.
Peggy knows, yeah.
Yep, I know.
Beautiful. Well, let's dive in. My name is Matt Carpenter. For those of you that are seeing us for the first time, right, we're here representing College Aid Pro tonight. I'm one of the founders, and I've been doing this for coming up on 20 years. We're almost 20 years of doing this, which is wild to say, but I friggin' love it. So I'm as enthusiastic as ever to guide the next class. We've almost put the class 2023 to bed. We got a little bit of work left. We're still appealing for some more money at these colleges, and then we're still gonna have to talk about the best way to pay the bill if we have resources, and how to borrow if we have to take a loan. But I'm already looking forward to you guys, because this is what we love to do, right? It's such a hard challenge, but it's awesome. It means your kids are going off to college, and that's freaky, right? I say every day, it's your kids and your money. No kidding, you're stressed out, right? I mean, those are some pretty hot topics there. It makes a ton of sense, but I'm going to remind you when I think when I'm doing my job pretty well, or I'm kind of dialed in on a psychological level with what you are going through. I try to remind you guys with some consistency, right? So for you class 2024 families, a year from now, you're done. Like you're just over a year from now, your kids are going to be going off kind of forever, right? They're coming, and I don't say that in a negative way. That's just the deal. So I try to do my best to say, yes, this is scary. And yes, it's the admissions piece, and are they going to get into their top choices, and how are we going to pay for it? Totally get all that, but try to do your best not to lose sight of the fact of this is the last year that your kids are in your house, right? And I think that's important, because I think it's easy to lose sight of that because this process is freaking nuts, right? And for those of you that have been through it, you know that. For those of you that haven't, you've listened to your friends that have just gone through it or whatever. So you have an understanding, right? So, but I don't want to forget that. And I think it's important to try to lean into that and have some perspective. And your job, right? Peggy and I have done this a bazillion times, right? Led families. through this process the right way, keep following along with us and you're going to be in great shape, right? Let us do the heavy lifting for you. And Peggy, I saw there's a couple of folks with multiples here and some twins. One of the best things on her very decorated resume is the fact that she's done this herself, right? Sent her own twins off to college. And again, this is for those of you that have not tuned in with us before, you're in the presence of the fairy godmother of financial herself. So, and again, I'm in the Boston area. Peggy's out in Seattle. So Peggy, why don't you say hi and take us away?
Yeah, so I would say, from what Matt was saying, I wouldn't say they're leaving the house forever. It's just they're starting a new chapter, right? And it's a significant chapter. I mean, you're all hoping that they don't come back home again and live in your basement and, you're cooking the meals, right? So it's the end of that chapter. And I know it's crazy, but it doesn't have to be as crazy as it is for most families. And the key is that you all become informed consumers. And that's really what gets me out of bed, what gets Matt out of bed. And this part, I like the appealing part. I like it a lot, but I'm a planner. I'm a financial planner by background. So it's kind of just ingrained in me. So I love this part. I love meeting with families and just hearing and looking and going, there's a planning opportunity. There's planning, I sound like a big nerd, but there truly are a lot of opportunities. And tonight, this is the first night we're doing this presentation with this little twist. So we kind of laid it out so that we can kind of teach you. And if you do fall in this bucket, which a lot of you maybe do, or you're not going to get need-based aid, there's still other planning opportunities. So really stick with us as we go through, our different webinars, because we really will guide you. We have parents writing in saying, you know what, I went and did this and I got more money, and just from your guidance. So we know the journey you're on. Matt knows it intellectually. He's been doing it for 20 years. I know it from helping families and doing it myself. So we know what we're doing and we can guide you. And that's a quarter or a third of the stress, is like not knowing what's coming. So we'll keep you informed. And when you actually go on visits, you'll be much more informed, and it'll take a little bit of the stress away. So a couple housekeeping items real quick. We love questions. So if you have questions, I know we asked you to put some stuff in the chat, put it in the Q&A for questions, and you can click the box if you want to be anonymous. And it gets captured that way. So definitely, and we'll remind you if you forget. And we are sending out a recording and the slides tomorrow. So Matt was just saying he met with the guy who's, he watched the recording with his family. And so you'll have that. All right. So I know that's always a big question. All right. So let me share my screen. And here we go. So as I just said, this is our mission. This is tied into what I just said, to end the student loan. Actually, on our website, Candace pointed out to me, Matt, it says student debt crisis, but same difference. By empowering families smarter for college. The only way you do that is by being an informed consumer, which is by learning all this stuff. So there we are, the happy couple. So all of you should have received an email that encouraged you to set up a free MyCap account. So if you did, great. We're going to hop in there during the webinar and you can actually have yours open and see your EFCs. If you haven't, Matt's going to pop it in the chat. Super simple. Just click get started for free and follow the prompts and you'll be in there, because it'll give you a lot of good information.
Well, I'd say, and specifically, Peggy, real quick, the reason why I'd recommend you do it right now, if you haven't already, it's going to confirm your belief, right? I think most people are on tonight by nature of the content with the assumption that you're not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid or not much need-based financial aid. That's going to confirm it for you. Because Peg and I have both been doing this a very long time, as well as the rest of the folks on our team, and a ton of people incorrectly assume that they're not eligible for financial aid, right? And vice versa. But the first thing that you should do is confirm your intuition, because we can't tell you the amount of families that make that mistake because of what their colleagues experience was, or their neighbors, or their family members, whatever. So just go confirm it, and that's where we want to start.
Yeah, that's a great point. Get in there, and then you'll see your EFCs, and then you'll know for sure. or maybe you realize, oh, you know what, maybe I am eligible somewhere. So just very high level, the way financial aid works is like all of these colleges are discounting. So we're going to be focusing on the non-need forms of discounting from colleges and from outside sources tonight. But that being said, the need-based grants that you see on the slide here, that's if you do have financial need. The middle bucket we're going to talk about tonight, because if you truly do not have need-based aid, that's going to be the name of the game, the best name of the game, honestly, because that's endowment money based on your child. And it doesn't matter if you're Bill Gates or you're unemployed as far as your financials. And then colleges also give loans and work study. We're not going to really focus on that tonight, but that's how colleges are discounting. So if you didn't know that, that's a huge takeaway, that all these colleges, they're on sale. It's just a matter of how they're on sale. So to be eligible for need-based aid, you have to have something called an expected family contribution, which is actually going to be called a student aid index by the time the FAFSA comes out this fall or this December now. It has to be below the cost of attendance of the school, which is the tuition, fees, room and board, books, etc., which is that sticker price that we all know has been going up. They subtract the CFC, and when you create your MyCap account, you'll see your three, one's about to go away, but the FM, federal methodology, and the institutional methodology, EFCs, those are the big guns. Those are the ones you want to look at. If yours are $150,000, that confirms, like Matt said, that you don't have need-based eligibility. But they take their costs, they subtract the EFC, and if that's zero or a negative number, you have no need. But it's important to know that for sure. So this EFC or SAI and how it's made up, I want to hit on two things that are on the right side of this slide, because these are good nuggets for you to understand. First one is probably a lot of you have saved for college, and you've probably chosen to save in a 529, and you're the owner. Your grandma and grandpa might be the owner as well. That's not in the equation on the FAFSA, but if you're the owner, that's an asset of yours. So if you take nothing from tonight but that, when you get to do the FAFSA, which we're going to recommend everybody do, remember that. It's logical to think it should be your child's because the child's a beneficiary. You're saving for your child to pay for their college, but it's actually an asset of yours. So keep that in mind. That's huge, because if you have any need-based eligibility, parent assets are assessed at 5.64 versus 20 or 25%. The other piece is, sure, a lot of you own your home and you might be sitting on a lot of home equity, meaning the market value of your home.
You might have just muted yourself. I'm not sure, I can't hear you.
Oh, really? Then hold on, let me unplug. Can you hear me now?
Nothing.
You can't hear me? Still can't hear me?
You guys can hear?
Can everybody else hear me? They can all hear me.
Might have been me, buddy. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. Hey, people are paying attention, Peggy.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep rolling.
Paying attention. I don't know what happened. Keep going.
Okay. All right. But you still can't hear me?
No, I can. I can now.
Okay. Good. Okay. So your home. So a lot of you probably own your home. So one of these forms, the CSS profile.
All right, Peggy, real quick. My mom just texted me. I can hear. Our number one fan up there. Thanks, Mom.
Thank you, Donna. I love you. Matt's mom always comes on our webinars, so we love it. And I just got to meet her in person last week. But anyways, that's a whole other story. So if you own your home, the one form is going to ask you about your home. So you want to make sure that you're not overvaluing your home. And as we have on the slide here, you can actually take the value of your home and take off 15-20%, because as we all know, if you've ever sold a home, you don't get all the proceeds, unfortunately. They go to closing costs and realtors and everything else. So just two nuggets there about the EFC. We're not focusing on this piece of it tonight. And then just the other piece of this EFC SAI is the income. And basically it's based on your AGI. There's other pieces to it, but this is by far the biggest part of it, which is where, and I'm going to show you an example of a minute, and a family that has a pretty decent amount of income. But the takeaway here too is it's a 2-year look back. So all of you 24 class parents, it's all going to be about last tax year. And then we saw a couple 25s. That's going to be this year that you're in now. So
sorry, Peg, but just because we got a couple questions around this in terms of property values, whether it be your primary residence or investment rental properties, the same deal. Like for some colleges, they consider your home equity fair game, right? So how we report that to the colleges can matter. All colleges will look at other property, right? So again, it's kind of the same thing in terms of how we report that to colleges. Can have an impact and does matter. So we want to be strategic specifically in terms of how we report the values to those colleges. So
yeah, you want to be honest, but you don't want to inflate anything, and you don't want to overshare, basically. So just to challenge you, because there's probably still people sitting there going, yeah, whatever, Peg, I'm not eligible for need-based aid. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and go into our software, but I just want to show you. So I put in a sample family. They have a gross income of $250,000. So that's pretty nice living. I mean, I know in certain parts of the country it goes a lot further than others. $500,000 of assets that they're going to have to report, and $1 million in home equity. So that's a family that's doing pretty well. So let me show you this family and what it looks like as far as getting need-based aid. So you can see they have SAIs up here. The other thing I want to tell you is they have a child who's a freshman in college right now and a 23. So you might not have twins. I know a couple people did, but you might have kids where you have crossover years. That's super common. So that's a huge advantage in the financial aid world. And it might change for a bunch of schools this fall, but some of these schools that I have up here, except for Chapman, still a huge advantage. So remember that $250,000, $500,000 of assets, and $1 million of home equity. And you see right here the sticker prices, which is irrelevant. Like I said, these guys are all on sale. Look at the discounts. Even though they make that amount of money, a big part of it because they have to in school starting this coming fall. So that's where it gets really not good to listen to your neighbor that has an only child that says you're never going to get anything, don't fill it out. They don't have the same financial situation in the same household that you do. So you want to be really careful. Definitely check this out. So I'll just hop into BU, for example.
And sorry, and Peg, just real quick, right now, what Peg is sharing on her screen is the platform, is the MyCap platform, College Aid Pro platform. So I just put the link in there again. So again, this is just showing this family's financial aid eligibility, and they're kind of getting some clarity on whether or not they're going to get discounts at these particular colleges, right? Which is
exactly
you guys to start. Yep.
Yeah, and this shows you Boston University, they're getting almost $23,000 of need-based grants. So if this family decided, oops, I shut it, sorry. This family decided, oh, I'm not filling that stuff out, you're leaving all that money on the table. So you want to be really careful. All of these schools here are showing discounts. I'm not guaranteeing that's going to happen at every school. Here's Miami University in Ohio, no discounts. And by the way, I put in a child that's not getting merit at any of these schools. I made the I took out the test scores, and I lowered the GPA. So this is all need-based aid that you're seeing here. So the point I'm making is just be careful. Confirm, like Matt said, confirm that you're not eligible, and remember those crossover years, because they can reduce an EFC by 30 to 40% at schools. And it's a big deal. It can all of a sudden, $10,000 a year in my book, even for 1 year, that's a lot of money, or even a couple thousand. So, so just keep that in mind. So let me go back to my slides here. So, okay. So I've done my best there. You guys will be thinking, all right, I'm eligible, I'm not eligible. So let's move on to the next piece here.
Yeah, and I think and hopefully that gives you an idea, right? Because we've seen families with have a $500,000 income still qualify for need-based aid based on other variables and things like this. And it would make our jobs easier if we could just say, hey, if you make more than this and have more than this in savings, don't even bother thinking about need-based financial aid. But it's not that cut and dry. There's too many variables to be able to say that. So that's why we try to be pretty challenge you, as Peg said a little bit. Let's confirm we're not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid before we write that off altogether. That said, for a percentage of you, right? I'm guessing a meaningful percentage of you, you're not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid. And as good as we are, what we do, we're not going to be able to, wave a magic wand to change that. That's going to be the deal. So how are you going to get discounts, right? Because you don't want to be the only one paying full rack rate here, right? Like Peg said, basically everybody's discounting in some capacity, and you want to take advantage of that. So there's a couple things to think about here. I mean, the first one that might be I think is the most obvious is, well, I want my kid to apply to schools where they're going to get scholarships that are also going to be great fits for my kid, right? We have to thread that needle, and we got to do both. We say all the time, I can give you tons of schools that are going to give your kids tons of money, but if they don't care about those schools, that's useless information. So we have to marry those two things, right? And I'm going to go into detail about that in a second here. The other point I just want to emphasize is that some colleges, in order to be considered for merit-based scholarships, you still have to apply for the traditional need-based financial aid route, right? You still have to do the FAFSA, you still have to do the CSS profile. A lot of NYU is a school that we always kind of pick on in that sense, in that it's a very popular school. They get, insane amounts of applications each year. But if you want to be considered for merit, you have to do the FAFSA and the CSS profile, or else you're not even going to be looked at in terms of getting scholarships there, right? And I'll go into our platform in a second here to go take a deeper dive on the scholarships. But the next one is that the next point I want to emphasize, that I don't think is common knowledge, is that not every college gives scholarships, and that number is growing. Okay, now there's about 100 colleges in the country where scholarships do not exist, right? There's not one Ivy League school that gives scholarships, right? Not one kid is walking around Harvard or Dartmouth or Princeton, and a lot of these NESCACs or Amherst or Williams or Middlebury and schools of the like, across the country. There's no scholarships there, right? If a student is getting a discount, it's because they're getting need-based financial aid. So it's really important, because we work with a ton of families that maybe are not eligible for need-based financial aid just because the formula says so, right? But they're not in a position to start writing checks for $90,000 a year. And next year, a lot of these colleges are going to start costing $90,000 a year, right? Plus 4 years, plus 3 kids, right? Even though you have some means and some resources, that's ridiculous. Okay. But nevertheless, some of these colleges that's going to be the expectation. So as we're building this list of schools, we need to be aware of where merit scholarships are even a possibility versus where they're not. Okay. Which again, in that same kind of vein, when we talk about building this list of schools, right? And most of you are in that part of the process or just beginning that part of the process. It's important, especially if we're not eligible for need, that we're applying to competing schools, right? Because you have to, these colleges like to say, hey, we're nonprofit and we're higher, they're businesses. These are, in a lot of cases, these are multi-billion-dollar corporations. Essentially, they just don't pay taxes, right? That's because they're a nonprofit. But this is big business, right? And as consumers, you want to have that mindset. And just like any other major investment, you want to create leverage, right, for yourself, so that when you go back to a school, who cares what your income is? Who cares what you have in savings? You want to say to that school, listen, your top competitor gave my kid $10,000 more. If you can't match it or come close, we're going to the competition, right? That is an important part of this process, and something we're seeing many, many times over every single day, especially this time of year, regardless of families' EFCs and financial aid eligibility or lack thereof, right? So again, as you're building that list and those top schools come to fruition, it's very, very common. We do this all the time for the families that we work with. We say, we know you have zero interest in applying to the school, but I'll just pick an example in my backyard here, right? In Massachusetts, if your kid is on the engineering track and they want to go to RPI, right, Rensselaer Polytech in New York here, they have multiple competitors, but their most direct competitor is WPI, Worcester Polytech here in Mass. If you hated WPI, but you want to go to RPI, I'm still going to make you apply to WPI just so we can use that as leverage, and vice versa, right? So and again, just about every school has their that's relevant. Okay, so that's an important piece. And then the other thing is, guys, I think so many people get, and I don't blame them, this isn't a judgment thing, but get wrapped up in that sticker that you put in the back of the car where your kids are going, right? There's a million, there are a ton of schools where your kids can go have an amazing experience, graduate with amazing opportunities, and not all of them cost $90,000. Right. So there are other ways to kind of think outside the box here. And outside of scholarships, there's also just schools that the sticker price is lower, right? And something that we're huge fans of internally are honors colleges at the state schools, right? That are kind of like colleges within the college that are just as prestigious as some of the more, name brand type of schools. So that's just a kind of some food for thought that is maybe obvious, but in my experience, families, a lot of families that have some means, that have really smart kids, just kind of overlook those opportunities. So we don't want you to do that. And you can go to the next slide quick, Peggy, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so just a couple of other points here on the merit-based side of this. Especially if we're not eligible for need-based financial aid, we're really just dealing with admissions offices. So if we get an initial offer and we didn't get a scholarship, or we got a scholarship, but we want to get more, when we push back, we're pushing back specifically with the admissions office, and we want the student to be the loudest voice in the room there. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We'll tease it a little bit at the end, but again, you've heard us mention a couple times in passing that what we're doing right now in April for the class 2023 is, once we've been accepted to a school and got an offer, we're pushing back to see if we can do better, right? Another great thing about merit-based aid is that we know it's going to be there for all 4 years. Okay, so it's a little bit different than need-based aid, which could go up or down based on the family situation. This is flatline, so we can count on that being there for all 4 years, right? And so I think those are some of the biggest takeaways here. And Peggy, actually, if you wouldn't mind, what I'll do is let me just log in here.
Share.
Yeah, I'll share.
And we always get this question. It's a good one, so I'll answer it while Matt's flipping over there. People are, somebody asked, how do we know what are competing schools? One of the best ways is to look at the conference they're in, the sports conference, right? So typically, like, schools are going to be in the same conference, so that's a good way. Also, in MyCap, you can look and see, hey, what's the typical kid that they're accepting with grades and test scores? And like schools, like if the average test scores are 1,500 on the SAT and another school it's 1,100, they're not competing schools, right? I just met with a family today and they had Carnegie Mellon, Johns Hopkins, and Barnard. Well, they're all going to be like, yeah, they're all at that same level of, not the same type of school that they necessarily, same atmosphere, but same kind of kid. So that's a way between the sports and kind of looking at the school. That's a good. What conference are you talking about? The sports conference, like what's the one you always? Well, you can talk about.
I'm as a Division I athlete.
Yeah, I know. I'm giving you that. I'm handing you that.
As a Division I athlete. Okay, so I went to Stonehill College, which everybody, regardless, I saw some people are from New Mexico, Des Moines, Iowa. Everybody's heard of Stonehill College as a Division I football powerhouse.
Keep telling yourself that, okay.
Well, it was Division II back when I played, but we've since moved to Division I. So, but anyways, we play in a conference called the NE10, and some of the other schools in our conference, Bentley University is our great example. That was our big rival athletically, but they're our rival as an institution, right? So that would be an example of hey, if you want to go to Stonehill, apply to Bentley. If you want to go to Bentley, apply to Stonehill, right? And again, same thing. The athletic conference is really a good one, right? The NESCACs is another one here in the Northeast. Williams, Bates, and Bowdoin, and Amherst and Middlebury, right? These they play each other athletically, but the institutions are competitors with one another, and that kind of plays out across the board.
Well,
And
you can also think like liberal arts colleges. Like there's a group of colleges called the Colleges That Save Lives. There's a book written on them. They're small, very student focused liberal arts colleges. They're gonna probably want to match, and they'll care about a competing offer from one of their peer, liberal arts colleges. So that kind of thing.
so let's do this. Why don't you guys throw out a couple colleges that you guys are talking about at home or getting ready to tour or have toured for April vacation, or some of your top choices. Let's put them into chat and see how they do with merit scholarships for better or for worse here. Okay, so no, and I appreciate that. I'm getting all right. So let's do I saw the Loyola one. I'm just gonna there's a few Loyolas, of course, across the country, but let's pick on Loyola in Maryland here. And if whoever wrote that, just confirm or deny that that is in fact the Loyola you were referring to. But let's click into them, right? We see we're gonna get a discount, okay? But let's see how and why, right? So for this family, this is a smart kid, right? This is a smart kid. We're going to be eligible for a little need-based financial aid here. We're going to get a $35,000 scholarship. So this is interesting, right? Because regardless of the financial situation, based on this student, they can count on with a certain amount of confidence. And by the way, we've been freaking nailing our specifically scholarship projections for this year. So you can feel pretty good that if your inputs are accurate with what you put in here, the outputs are going to be accurate. We'll never be perfect, right? There's too much subjectivity in this whole deal, but in terms of we're very rarely have egg on our face here. So this family, again, regardless of their financial situation, they're going to get a $35,000 merit-based scholarship, right? And for every college in the country, we have all the scholarships that they offer, the qualifications for each. And like I said, we're really good at nailing, how much is this kid going to get? And that's all I want you focused on for now as you start to build this list, right? Is like, what's this school actually going to cost me? I don't care about the sticker price. I don't want you to care about the sticker price. I want you to focus on the net cost. You don't need to know why you're going to get there either. If you want to, we have some context in terms of the why, right? So if you click on the admissions tab, we're going to show you, well, here's the average GPA, here's the average test scores. And usually you can say, okay, well, that makes sense that you guys are projecting this award, or that makes sense in terms of, okay, I kind of get it that my kid's not being projected to get anything there, right? And if we want to look at the financial aid tab, which I actually want to change this to basically saying their business model, right? This is basically the school's business model. What EFC methodology do they use? How generous are they on that front? What's the average scholarship that they give? Because that's something we'll leverage this time of year to say, hey, we got a 15,000, you saw in, maybe you saw in Loyola, their average scholarship is just under 23,000. Well, if my kid got 15,000, I would push back and say, hey, we got $7,000 less than average. Now, they could say, well, that's because your kid's less than the average, but we've been very effective in being able to push back just based on that data point, right? That we got less than the average. We know what your average is and we want to get it. All right. So, so that's an important piece there. And
Hey, Matt, can you go back to the dashboard? Because somebody put in and said, I was blowing through it too quickly. Just hit the main points here, because he just said, can you just go through the key info on the dashboard again?
Yeah, I think the big ones, guys, is the EFCs are front and center, which basically means that's the starting point in terms of the dollar amount that these colleges think you can pay on an annual basis. Okay. And there's a couple different methodologies that any given college can use. And so that's usually the foundation for being able to determine whether or not you're going to be eligible for need-based financial aid. Now, for some of you, your EFCs are going to say, I had a meeting earlier today and the EFCs were 300,000 on the federal level, 350,000 on the institutional level. They're not getting any need-based financial aid, right? Because they're saying that's what you can pay each year at a minimum, and the cost of attendance, even at the most expensive colleges for now, are less than $350,000 a year, right? But if those EFCs are less than the cost of attendance at any college, well, now we're in play to be eligible for some need-based financial aid. So that's, at least for tonight, a little bit more than you even need to know. But our takeaway is just whatever the platform is telling you, that's what I want you focused on. I want you focused on the net cost, not on the sticker price. Because again, even if you have some of these insanely high EFCs, you could still be getting discounts just based on what we're projecting from merit-based scholarships. Okay. Was that some of the main takeaways, Peggy, that you?
Yeah, I think that's great. And people are asking about stuff around early decision. I mean, early decision, basically, some schools between early decision and early action make up a third or half their class. So I see it more, it's more of an admissions play, right? You lose some leverage. Doesn't mean you can't appeal and you won't get merit aid and you won't get need-based aid. That's actually not true. And I've been very successful in appealing when they under award a kid who's got need, which is not what we're focusing on tonight. But just realize that's not the way to, you can't lay out all the competing offers on the table like Matt's talking about if you can afford to pay whatever the ED school offered you. So you lose some leverage, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be awarded anything. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and one other quick thing I'll tell you, just make sure we're okay on time here. But again, especially if you're not, this advanced search part of the platform will allow you to say, okay, let's say you've confirmed you're not going to be eligible for need-based aid. You can say, hey, go show me schools that are within 200 miles of my house that are smaller type schools that are four-year institutions that have this major, if you have any idea what your kid might like to major in, right? And then I just want you to sort them based on who's going to give my kid the biggest scholarship, right? And that's a really good way to leverage the technology here to say, okay, this is a Massachusetts resident, right? Hey, maybe Wheaton College wasn't on our list, but shoot, if they're going to give us $42,000 off the sticker price, I might take a closer look. And that happens to be a nice little school up in this neck of the woods. But anyways, that's something else you can do, and we want you to do as you're putting this list of schools together, because again, maybe Wheaton isn't a consideration, but we could use that great discount for leverage with your eventual top choice, right? Okay, Peggy,
let me get back in here. All right, so that's merit aid, and I just wrote somebody who came in a little late. You're going to get all these slides, so if we don't hit them all, don't worry about it.
And okay. Just thank you for your knowledge word.
Yeah, I know. I just noticed here. Okay, so we just want to take a couple minutes here. This follows in the theme of this webinar. Should you submit the FAFSA? And Matt already touched on some of this when he was talking about merit earlier. Both of us are telling you, yes, submit the FAFSA. It's good for your child's credit score, because these loans, if they take out loans, all in their name. And that's what that second bullet there, your child's automatically eligible for the federal loans. And you might want them to have skin in the game. But in the theme of what we're talking about today, if you look in the bottom left, some schools require it for merit. And Matt mentioned that. And unless you're going to figure all those out and make sure you know for sure, you could be leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table just because you didn't submit the FAFSA. The other piece is some schools, if you don't apply for financial aid freshman year, you're out of luck. So people that, I wouldn't roll that dice with my life, right? Life can change quickly, like I have in the bottom right corner. I mean, look what happened with COVID. Also, if you have a high EFC, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the college, if they know, if they're not need blind, it's like, oh, they have $100,000 EFC. They're not going to tell their child that they have to leave junior year because we can't afford it anymore. You got to come home to a state school. So please, please, please submit the FAFSA. And most of the time I recommend the CSS. There's a few instances where I don't, but that in this is, if you don't have need-based eligibility, you want to be submitting that FAFSA so you're not leaving money on the table. And we will do webinars in the fall walking you through that. So bucket number 3 that Matt's going to hit now, do a quick run through, is, okay, you've maximized the endowment money, you've gotten your merit, you've submitted your FAFSA, you can go outside to try and find money.
Right. And this one, I mean, we do kind of full presentations on private scholarships, but there's a decent percentage of that we spend on basically setting expectations, right? Because I think there's a myth and kind of a misnomer out there. There's tons of them, as you guys are probably experiencing already with all the different, conflicting pieces of information you hear. But like private scholarships in general, for the vast majority of families, are not a big piece of the puzzle, right? And when we look at all the financial aid that's given in kind of a pie chart, roughly about 5% comes from private scholarships each year. So to me and to us internally, that's a really telling statistics. And we're like, well, we're going to focus on the 95% of discounts that are given each year and only spend a little bit of time focused on the 5%, which is private scholarship. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of set the precedent there of like, this isn't a huge focal point. That said, every dollar counts. And if we can get a couple bucks just by some sweat equity and being efficient, let's do it. So let's kind of talk about it quickly. Now, in terms of who should do what, this is very similar, I think, to the college, the standard college admissions and financial aid application processes, where the student owns the admissions applications, they own the essays, they have to go get the recommendations, they have to do the legwork in terms of the applications. When the financial piece comes in, well, usually that's a parent or parents that have to own that piece. Same deal with the private scholarships, right? And we usually tell people that if you do this right, like if you nail this piece of it, you should be able to obtain between $1,000 and $3,000. Like I'm expecting that out of you if you take care of, if you do kind of the bare minimum here, which is not nothing, right? I'm not saying there's no effort involved here, but if you kind of hit this piece right, you should be able to get $1,000 or $3,000. And how we position that to students, to the kids, is we say, guys, do 10 hours of work, right? Put 10 hours of work in, and you're going to get between $1,000 and $3,000 in return for that. Well, that's between $100 and $300 an hour, right? I think especially for 16, 17, 18-year-olds, hopefully they can kind of get behind that and say, well, that's a good use of my time, right? Now, most of the deadlines and most of the legwork for applying for private scholarships are not until, again, talking to you 2024 families, it's not until next winter, really. End of fall, going into the new year. For the most part, Peggy's going to highlight a specific scholarship that there's an exception there. And I'm not saying don't start looking now, because there can be some advantage to doing so. But for the most part, we're talking about the end of this year going into next year. Okay. Go ahead, Peggy. That's good for this one. Okay, and the first one, I won't spend a lot of time here at all. The most reliable place for you to get private scholarships is through your town, through your community. The school counselors have the local list of scholarships that your kids can apply for. On average, this kind of third bullet point here for me is the most telling. 33% of students and families apply for local scholarships. So you're in this really small pool. And these local organizations have to give this money away each year. So your odds are tremendous, right? So that's where I want you focused is locally. And that's the biggest takeaway there.
And this will be next year. Like when you get into senior year, go into the counseling office, start looking around. We're giving you some tips and tricks for next, for when it's senior year, basically.
Exactly. So, and then in our software that we've been showing you, we've been in and out of MyCap tonight. We have a $9.1 billion private scholarship database built in there. And it's not all, but it's most of the national scholarships, right? So you can search by state. So after you shop locally, go search by your state and then go look nationally based on your unique criteria, ethnicity, religious background, what your kid might want to major in. These types of things you can filter by, and it's any of these other types of private scholarship search engines you would pay for. It's part of our free software, right? It's a free part of the platform. So that's something that you're going to want to leverage when you go look beyond kind of your local community. Okay. And we can skip that one for now.
Yeah, basically create an email before you start doing all this, because you might get spam if you're looking on websites and stuff, is the bottom line.
So for the boarding schools, right? For boarding schools or the private schools, oftentimes you get to double dip there, right? So somebody wrote in, what about if my kid goes to a boarding school, or what if they go to a private school in a different district, whatever? Oftentimes you get the double dip. So I would contact the school counseling office at the boarding school or at the private school to say, hey, are there scholarships that my kid can apply for because they go to your school? The answer is almost universally yes. And then most communities will also let you apply for their local scholarships, even if the kid doesn't attend high school there. So oftentimes that can be advantage in terms of local scholarships. All right. Go ahead, Peggy. I think what's the last one here? Yeah, and this is just another one, right? We're kind of hammering that one tonight more than I even expected. But a lot of these private scholarships, you just got to complete the FAFSA as a part of it to throw your hat in the ring. So just kind of another advantage to why you should consider doing so. Skip that for now, Peggy. Let's
yeah, you'll get the slide, but we don't. So this is a kind of an atypical one, and that's why I like to point it out. So you'll have this slide deck. So for class of 2024, they typically have a deadline for juniors next month in May, and then the second deadline is September of senior year. Go on and look. This is full tuition at any school in the country for all 4 years. So not the typical, most private scholarships are one-offs and you have to have this side hustle all 4 years. So maybe applicable to your child, go ahead and check it out. But that's one of the good ones. It's not as competitive as Coca-Cola and the big ones that we all know about. So you've got the URL there that you can check out. All right. So let me just touch on this real quick. So again, we're not talking about getting money from the colleges anymore, but there is a tax credit if you see the phase outs here, right? So it's 160 to 180 married filing jointly. So my family that made $250,000, they're not going to get this. And I'll talk about very high level something for them. But just so you understand this, if this is applicable to you, when I say tax credit, what I mean is if you owe the government $10,000 in taxes, it comes right off of that. So now you owe $7,500. So I tell families, well, you got that discount. If you're disciplined, you can kind of earmark that for college or whatever you want to do. But the reason why you need to know about it ahead of time is you have to have $4,000, which is in the bottom left, of college expenses that you've paid for tuition and fees and or books, not room and board, that have not been paid from a tax advantaged account. So typically for most people, that's a 529. So you can't pay for everything from your 529 and then say, hey, I want to get this credit. It'll kick it out, and your CPA will usually tell you, but the years that tax year's over and you've lost the opportunity. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're paying $4,000 from cash flow or a regular account where you didn't get tax-free growth and no tax on the earnings. So that's just one thing. If you are a business owner, or if you can make it so that you can pay your child some sort of, people that have small businesses, they keep the books, whatever, they clean the office, some job where a student is providing at least half their support, they can claim themselves on a tax return. You can, and this would require you to talk to a CPA, us, your financial advisor, but I'm just planting the seed that if your child claims his or herself, then they can most likely claim AOTC because they're single and they don't have $80,000 of income. So there are some tax strategies that if you're completely placed out of need-based aid, different things you can do.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of people get cute here, right? Where if you're a business owner, you pay your pay the student and they have a meaningful amount of income. Again, we've seen this vary based on the CPA. So they got to be involved in that conversation, but then they get to take advantage of that American Opportunity Tax Credit. We've also seen property owners do that, right? So you make the student the property manager, right, for your properties, pay them pay them a salary, and again, now they get to claim the American Opportunity Tax Credit. So
yeah, but these are strategies that you really have to know you're not eligible for need-based aid because you're doing things where you're going to shoot up your EFC, and you want to make sure that doesn't matter. So
totally,
again,
100%.
back to our original premise of knowing your family.
No, it's a great call, and it's more to plant seeds. And again, we're not making any firm recommendations. It's just there's creativity to be had here, right? Okay, so we've teased this a couple times, and again, and this is one of my favorite parts of this process is going back to these colleges and getting more money out of them. But one of the ways, and a really important way that we can maximize our odds of doing it successfully is in this early part of the process, right? That you guys are in, starting to build that college list and strategically competing or applying to competing schools, right? So that's, again, we talked about that earlier, so I won't beat a dead horse. And there's some other kind of takeaways here, and you guys are going to get the slides tomorrow, but that's the important one at this stage of the game.
Yeah, this is another way to cut the cost, even if you don't have need-based eligibility.
Yeah. So, and we've got a couple of great questions around this. Obviously, we have a pretty educated audience tonight that's all over some of these impending changes. But you guys, you class 2024 are the guinea pigs for the biggest changes in the kind of overall higher education space in decades, right? These are there some sweeping changes that are happening for the first time with you all. Some of them are great, right? And the short kind of summary of the great changes is that there's going to be more money available for the families that need it the most. Right. So there's going to be more resources for families that need the most help. The form itself, the FAFSA application itself is going to be it's shortened massively, right? We're going from about 100 questions to about 35 questions. So I think those are things that we can all get behind and support and feel really good about. And everybody's psyched about that, right? But I think what the Department of Education did is they robbed Peter to pay Paul a little bit. Right. So to get more money for the families that need it most, it's not coming out of the federal government or the college's pockets. Right. It's coming out of other college bound families. Right. And I think and there's a couple of folks that are going to get whacked the hardest, small business owners, because right now the FAFSA does not account for any assets. You report $0 in assets or investments if you have a business and you have less than 100 employees. That's going away next year. Okay, so they're going to get smoked, which is ridiculous. There's also what we think for the most part internally as a team, who's being impacted negatively the most are families that are going to have more than one kid in college at once, right? So Peggy with her twins, my parents that had me and my sister 2 years behind, right? And I'm sure a ton of you all, that right now the calculation accounts for that. And if you have more than one kid in school at once, they're saying, okay, well, you still have the same income for the household, the same resources for the household, but you're putting 2 kids in college at the same time. So we'll split it in half in terms of what we think you can afford for your EFC. That's going away. So effectively, for many families at many colleges, most colleges, the cost of college is going to double. Okay, so that's our big problem. And so we're trying to do something about it. I started a petition, I guess over a year ago now, to try to stop this, right? At first, I just had a little hissy fit. And then I tried to figure out, well, what can we do to stop this? Peg just put the the link, and you can probably go to the next slide here, Peggy, to give a little visual to the people, right? So here's the petition itself, where now we're over, I think we're like 66,000 signatures, right? So we're really making some headway, but basically the decision makers on Capitol Hill are telling us until you get 100,000 signatures, you're not going to move the needle. But we're friggin' 2/3 of the way there. So please sign it, please share it, even if it doesn't apply to you or your family. I promise some of your buddies are impacted by it, your neighbors, family, whatever. So it takes 30 seconds, not even, to sign it. And again, if you're open to it, it'd be awesome if you'd share it on Facebook or whatever. So, and again, I know plenty of you are being impacted by it in a major way.
Yeah, and I'm just saying this, but I haven't talked to Matt about it, but I'm sure we'll be doing another one of our webinars all about the FAFSA Simplification Act this summer as it comes up, just so that you guys understand all the nuts and bolts of it. So some people asked if we were going to share about our services, and I said, yeah, we wait till the end here and we have fun coupons. So if we did our job tonight, you've learned hopefully many things that will be hugely valuable to you. But the other thing is you want to keep the ball rolling. You want to keep learning and not just say, oh, that was great, and put it on the stack and you have a busy life. So Matt's going to go into some detail here, and I'll stop sharing my screen. But please, 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 from one parent to another, stay tuned in to what we're sharing. And I know it's hard and life is busy, but you got to have some ownership of this process and understand what's going on, and it'll create less stress, and it'll save you a lot of money and really help you with your relationship with your child during this last year. As Matt said, is the end and they're leaving. You want to have this good last year, right? So
I didn't mean to make it doom and gloom.
I'm just teasing you. All right, I will let you share your screen.
Yeah. Sorry. So a couple things here, guys. And again, for those of you that have followed along with us at all, you know that anytime we do a live event, we give a kind of we reward the folks that show up to listen to Peggy and I live and have kind of a one-time just today discount. Tonight is no different for those of you on for the first time. And I think we're super generous with these things. My CEO is always busting my bananas about it, but whatever. He doesn't have to do these things. So
yeah, he doesn't.
That's right. So I mean, we kind of broadly place people in 3 different buckets, right? And you can usually, I think most of you can kind of self-identify and know where you belong, at least today, right? And it's kind of like for the ultimate DIYer, you know who you are. I think we have a ton of great. And Peggy, if you haven't already, just put this.
Yeah, I'll put it in. I'll put the link to this in the chat for everybody.
Yeah, we got a lot of free resources, right? So I think if you're just the person that is like, I'm just all over this, I'm gonna get my black belt in how to send my kid to college. We're not gonna stay in your way, and we're gonna help support you there. And here's all the free resources you have. I think there's another iteration up from that where there's like, hey, I for the most part, I'm going to handle this thing and be on the front lines for every pain point of this process. But at some point, I want somebody to look over my shoulder and just gut check this thing for me, right? Does this list of colleges make sense? Should I go test optional here? Should I send the ACT here? Can you look at my CSS profile? Do I apply for financial aid here or not? Should we go to ED or EA? Right. So this is a great middle spot for you where you can mostly do it on your own, but just book an hour a la carte with one of our experts and have the full access to our platform, all the bells and whistles for a year. Right. And if you do it tonight, you do that for $239, which I feel very confident will be the best. Is a kind of no-brainer investment when we're looking at $90,000 a year for college. But you don't have to make that. You don't have to book that meeting yet tonight. Just sign up for that. You get again all the bells and whistles to our platform, and then you can book that meeting whenever you want. Right? Do it now. Do it 6 months from now. It's yours to decide. And then there's a percentage of families, and again, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I just know, again, there's a percentage of you that are like, I don't have the time for this. We're both working. We know it's at stake, but we just can't dedicate the time that's necessary for this. I need somebody to take over and guide me through this. And in some cases, guide my kid through this, guide both of us through this, right? And I'll talk about both of those from end to end. Or like, we have a complicated situation. We're divorced and we need kind of a middleman to help manage this whole thing, right? Or we feel like we're one of these families we're not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid, but we can't friggin' pay 90 grand a year. So we got to figure out how to make this thing more cost effective. And that seems like a challenge, right? So you're in this, wake me up when it's over type of category. And there's a few different ways that we do this, right? Now, one of them is if you just want financial aid help, I think in theory I should be, you work one-on-one with somebody on our team, one of our experts from beginning to end, right? So we help build your list of colleges, make sure that we know exactly what they're going to cost and who's competing with who, make sure that we're getting some meaningful discounts. We complete all the financial aid applications for you, so you don't have to worry about it. We do the FAFSA. We do the CSS profile, right? We're the ones that are on the front lines, leading the charge, going back to these colleges to get more money. And we got an unbelievable team, guys, right? On our team is a director of financial aid at Harvard, director of financial aid at MIT, director of financial aid, or former director of financial aid at Denison, now at Columbia College of Arts, director of scholarships at University of Oklahoma, right? And folks that have been doing this forever in the private sector, like Peg and myself. So we get to tap into all of this, and then how to pay the bill, right? So, if you have resources, when do you use what? If grandparents are coming in with their 529, what do we need to know about that? How do we get smart from a tax standpoint? So those are, again, that's kind of, again, you kind of know who you are, if that makes sense to you, right? And again, this is a tonight only discount, guys. I know we're creating some urgency, but especially for this part of the process that wake me up when it's over, we have a limited roster. This is a high touch process where you're working with somebody one-on-one, in some cases with two people. And so each year we have a limited roster. So that's why we have, kind of do our best to create some urgency. So hopefully give you guys some great value. And again, our kind of roster is full going into next year. The other two options we have, if you just want admissions help, right? We have unbelievable experts on that front, right? Where again, you can just book an hour, or if you want kind of the whole deal. And for me, I kind of look at this as if you want somebody driving your kid, right? Like I'm looking at Dan Bizig and Brian Ford on our team, right? Brian Ford has read over 60,000 admissions applications, right? He was the assistant director at Boston University. He worked with the UCs for a long time. So he's been on that side of the fence. So he knows, here's what I look for in an essay. Here's what I look for in a Common App. Here's what I look for in an interview. Again, Dan Bizig, same way. He's been doing this for 17 years. So these are some of the guys that you would work with on our team. If you just want the student to have somebody to have some accountability, right? And make sure we're nailing that. It's generally $4,000, right? It's $3,500 essentially if you buy tonight. Then the other thing, in my opinion, obviously I'm biased here, and coincidentally, it's the most expensive product that we're offering right now, right? But I truly believe in the value is that you can have everything, right? Is that, again, if you're one of these families that's like, we need all the help we can get, right? We have this combination package where you work with two professionals here, right? So you have somebody that is leading the charge with you as the parent or parents on the financial aid side, right? All those things I described. We're doing the FAFSA. We're leading the charge on appealing. We're making sure we're paying the bill in the right way. And you have someone driving, again, who I usually think of as the student, making sure they're accountable. How are we staying ahead of this timeline? How are we, making sure that we're not behind the eight ball that are driving this whole piece of it? And so this combo package, I think, has a tremendous amount of value. Obviously, it's a ton of money. I'm not, I'm not poo-pooing the cost here. But again, when we look at the value and we look at, what we're spending overall and the amount of hours and kind of legwork that goes into this, I feel incredibly confident that it's a huge value, right? And if
So
you feel,
Matt, can you speak to, somebody asked, if they have a child that's already in school, they can do the Wake Me part that's applicable on the financial side. Can you just speak to that for a minute?
yeah, in terms of, so they already have
So if
somebody.
they haven't done Wake Me When It's Over when the student was a senior, but now, at least that's how I'm understanding the question. They're already in college, maybe they want some help.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it could be the same deal, right? Where it's a complete reevaluation of, okay, where, let's look at this with a fresh set of eyes, and based on where you are and what deal you're getting right now, can we do better, right? And if you could start fresh, which you can each year when you reapply, can we do better than whatever your experience was at the current college and whatever your current price point is? So oftentimes, not always, right? We might look at it and say, hey, you would have been no better off had you have worked with us. I don't know, that could
Well, and
be
you could help with the forms, like,
exactly
we don't do the forms because the new FAFSA Simplification Act outlaws that. We don't do them, but you will not have heavy lifting. Let's just say it that way. And somebody asked, does the package include merit scholarships? We are looking at everything and anything around this whole process. We basically take it off your plate. You're involved because it's your FAFSA, it's your CSS, it's your child, obviously. But we've been on this journey, like I said at the beginning. So we basically guide you, do it for you. So yes, absolutely. Merit scholarships are a big part of it. And as Matt said earlier, junior year, I mean, talking about where you should apply, thinking about appeal season, strategically thinking about appeal season, so that you might get into schools that your child's not even interested in, but hey, now you can up the ante on the school that they are. So yeah, and that's a lot of times done with merit. So yeah, absolutely. Merit's part of the mix for sure.
And somebody just asked, like, where do we pay if we want one of the Wake Me Up When It's Over cap take the wheel packages? Just go to, I re-put it in the chat. You just need to go to that link and select whatever package you want. And once you click into one, right, if you go down to the bottom here, obviously we're going to outline the cost. You have the coupon code that's there. I mean, if you find us just off the internet, the kind of rack rate is $49.99. But once you put this information here and say submit and pay, you'll be prompted to put a coupon code in and then just pay, and then you'll hear from our team tomorrow with what we need from you to get started and the whole onboarding process and all of that. So obviously it's a big it's a commitment, but again, you're going to get a return on the investment. And if you don't, this is being recorded and you can hold me to that. And again.
Oh, so one other thing we don't want to forget, because we're over time, but we have an event coming up the first week of May called our boot camp. Yes. Completely free event. And do you have that page? You want to just share it real quick, Carp? I just put the link in the chat, or I can share it if you want it.
Oh no, I'll share it. Let me just grab it.
Because we're going to have 4 days of content for you. And, if you're seeing some of this stuff and you're already working with an independent counselor on the admission side, that's great. We partner with them. They do awesome work. That part's not applicable to you. If you just need to focus with us on the financial Wake Me When It's Over, that's great. Just disregard the admission stuff if you're working with an outside counselor. That's, you're already set on that piece.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the boot camp.
Yep. So yeah, and I think you put the
I put it in the chat.
But yeah, this is a great this is a great place to again get started in terms of as you guys are getting ready to go through this whole thing. I think we're covering the big kind of the big topics in this whole beast. So all right, well, I mean, I think we hit most of the questions here, Peggy, and hopefully we get an opportunity to work with a percentage of you folks. Again, I think we're biased, but we're good at what we do, buddy. I like to think so. And we got a great team that supports us and supports you guys. So thanks for tuning in tonight. Hopefully you learned some things. And again, at a minimum, you know, I hope you hire us or one of our experts to again take the wheel and guide you through this thing one-on-one. But at a minimum, just keep paying attention, keep showing up to you know, to this type of content, because we're not going anywhere, right, Peggy? Until they kick.
We got office hours every other Monday at 7 Eastern with our experts on there, and they handle as many questions as they can in an hour. So we're here to support. And then when you need the one-on-one guidance, we're here too. So
Yeah. Okay. All right, Peggy, I appreciate you, buddy.
yeah, you too. Everybody have a good night. If you're still on, Donna, good night. Have a good night.
Good night, Mom. You come tuck me in later if you want.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.